Welcome to Community Conversation this week, our podcast here at Christ Community Church. Today we have a very special guest with us, Jeremiah Vik with Youth for Christ and Campus Life. One of the visions that we have for this podcast is we want to be able to introduce our congregation and the community at large with the ministries that we felt compelled to support as a church. And so Youth for Christ is one of those ministries, one of those parachurch organizations here doing a great work in the Imperial Valley. And so we wanted to have Jeremiah be able to come in and to sit down with me today to be able to explain a little bit about the heart and the vision behind Youth for Christ and what kind of work they're doing here impacting the youth of our valley. So we hope you enjoy this conversation today. So Jeremiah, kind of starting off with you now. First question kind of on my list of questions here is just for you just maybe introduce yourself a little bit and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. It is a podcast, right?
It is a podcast.
Okay.
You got it. By the way, your beard is on point today.
Thanks, man.
You're probably one of the people.
Today.
Yeah, you're probably one of the people that gives me a run for my money in the beard department.
Oh,
here,
thanks, man. It's gotten a little bigger, since
it's
COVID
winter
season. Yeah, it is.
It's winter.
Yeah,
coming,
we got to stay warm, man.
That's right. That's what it is. That's what it is. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Tell me a little bit about yourself, other than that you have a great beard.
Yeah. Thank you. So I've been in the Valley here doing youth ministry for, I was trying to add up the math, but about 27 years, which sounds like a really long time.
Ran out of fingers.
Yeah. So I was a youth pastor for 13 years at the same church, actually just right down the street from here at First Baptist. And then I, during a time, volunteered, for Youth for Christ, and, you were there with me. We were doing a lot of stuff with YFC. And then about 14 years ago, I started on staff at Youth for Christ. And so
14 years,
isn't it nuts?
That is crazy. So you've actually been at Youth for Christ longer than you were at First Baptist now?
Yeah. So just about a year longer now, which, it's really crazy. But, 14 years is a long time to do anything, right?
Right, yeah.
So I'm in that role of executive director at Youth for Christ. Came in as a campus life director and was kind of looking for a tent making job as I was just planning a church, and so it was, wasn't my goal to be like a full-time 100% Youth for Christ parachurch guy, but that was God's vision for me. And
so you're actually doing ministry as you're tent making so that you can pastor.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool.
Yeah, not really sure if that's the right term to use for that.
Something like that, right?
It's a hybrid,
a little bit hybrid deal there. But it's better. You can have your hands on the plow and be doing ministry rather than having to do some other job that is going to take away your energy, your mental capacity. Yeah. So that's great. So we had some great times at volunteering at Youth for Christ.
We did, man.
With Todd Evangelist.
I know. I always laugh when I don't know how we had so much time to always be playing practical jokes and
but we really did.
But we did. We did so many goofy things.
We had a lot of smack talking in our fantasy football leagues. We had some good times there. Maybe some times that we're a little bit ashamed of, but there were still some good times.
I could probably find it.
No, let's not worry about that. Let's not worry about that. Yeah, you don't need to find anything. I'm sure you have them saved somewhere.
I think I do.
One day there'll be a roast and those things will come up. But
it wasn't a blackmail thing. It just you save stuff that means stuff to you.
So one of my favorite memories were the lock-ins we used to do. The True Love Waits lock-ins, and those aren't really as popular as they were when we were doing youth, or when I was helping with doing youth ministry. But man, the craziest time we had is when we had the lock-in down the street, and I don't know I'm sure you remember this because you were heavily involved in this, but the game that we had that one year where we made 4 quadrants in the gym, and the gym has carpet, right?
Yes,
and we had these marshmallows that were glow-in-the-dark marshmallows, and the whole game was to see which quadrant would have the least marshmallows at the end when the music stopped.
Right.
And so all these marshmallows are just flying through the
and
sky.
We made those marshmallows glow in the dark. They didn't come glow in the dark.
You dipped them in something, painted them or something,
was
right?
Part of the problem.
It took a long time. But the worst part about it is when these are throwing, we didn't really think this through quite well, because all of those marshmallows were stepped on and caked into the carpet.
Yeah, so they were pretty hard when we started, but
they could leave a welt.
Yeah, we didn't realize that after they were thrown, they were going to be in the carpet and people were going to be stomping all over them. And I think was your wife and 2 or 3 other ladies that were connected to our youth ministries spent the entire night scrubbing the floor
Right.
of the gym and just trying to clean up the mess.
It was quite a mess. And I don't know if it was the same year or it was a different year, but there was one year also where it rained really heavily. And so there was so much mud in the sanctuary.
Yeah.
And these happened on, Saturday nights, or Friday nights, Saturday nights. So church has to happen.
We had to have it cleaned up.
So we're locked in all night, and then we have to clean up before church happens. So yeah, those are good times.
So we had like from 7 a.m. to whatever time church started.
You're up for like 48 hours straight.
Yeah.
And I can't do it anymore. I don't know how you can continue to do it.
No, I don't do lock-ins anymore,
have
man.
people
I'll
do
tell
that
you
for you
what.
now, right?
I think lock-ins are evil. I learned my lesson.
Yeah.
But we did a lot of
that's part
stuff
of the reason
like
why I
that.
don't have any hair on my head is because of those lock-ins. So that's good. So you've been working with YFC full-time now for 14 years,
Yes.
but really for 27 years you've been working with Youth for Christ. And
Because volunteering all those years, I got really familiar with YFC, and also my heart got melded with the mission of YFC during that time, and I was passionate about what YFC does and what they stand for. So that's it was a no-brainer when I was offered the position.
Well, I'm glad you're there. That's for sure.
Thanks.
So things have changed a lot since those days.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the vision of Youth for Christ and campus life. And since then, you guys have a radio station, The Edge, also.
Yes, uh-huh.
So tell us a little bit about the vision that you want to cast for maybe your staff and your part-time staff in a direction that you're taking Youth for Christ. Kind of what this is what we do. This is our bell cow in the valley.
Yeah. So the mission of YFC is that we partner with the local church, and we want to reach all the lost kids that we possibly come into contact with, and our partnership with the local church allows us to be able to get these kids plugged in to the church and to be discipled. And so that's our main goal, is evangelistic, to partner with churches and like-minded ministries, and to make sure these young people that hear the gospel get plugged in and be discipled. But then I guess there's different layers to our ministry. We also have student leadership that we really value, and so because we place such a high value on student leadership, we do these big trainings every summer and get kids to basically be missionaries on their campus for Jesus. And so,
how many campuses are you guys on right now? Or
I know that's a question that you can't even ask anymore, right?
Yeah. We used to ask that. If you tell us the truth, right, you could get in trouble.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, all the campuses are closed now, so we can't be on any. And actually, we're not doing any face-to-face ministry with students, and we haven't been since
all
March.
Via Zoom, or
everything is via Zoom, or we're doing a lot of live events on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. But yeah, it's so prior to COVID, we had 27 ministry sites, and so I think 23 or 24 of those were junior high and high school campuses that we were on, where we had campus life clubs. And then, of course, we had other things going on. We had a club that met down at the office or down at our facility during the week. And then we had some ministry going on at Juvenile Hall and our parent life ministry. So 27 ministry sites all together. And we were working with about 1,200 students a week.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So in each of those sites, you have to have staff for each of those sites, and volunteers, right? Mm-hmm. So how many staff members and volunteers do you guys have kind of like on your books that you guys kind of over shepherd?
Yeah, so as far as like paid staff and or part-time staff, we've always had a small team of paid staff. And so right now it is our largest team we've ever had. We have 8 people on staff. We've never had a team this big before, but we need every man hour we can possibly get to pull this off during COVID. But yeah, so we would have usually a small team, 4 or 5 staff, and then we would engage just hundreds of volunteers. I mean, for an entire year of ministry, over 100 volunteers on our roster at any one time, and that was just necessary in order for us to have 1, 2, or even 3 volunteers on a campus.
Each campus has to have a teacher volunteer, right?
Yeah. So each campus has a teacher sponsor, and then in addition to that, they've got 1 or 2 of our trained volunteer staff that are going there leading that ministry site. And then you've got a team of student leaders. So you've got, if you throw in student leaders in that volunteer mix as well, you just have a ton of people that it takes to make the ministry happen.
So you're having to organize and oversee a lot of different volunteers, a lot of moving pieces in order to pull
Yes,
off reaching
yeah.
12, you said 1,200 students a month or a week?
A week, yeah.
1,200 students
About
a week.
1,200 weekly, the students that we were engaging, and that's if you just add up the number of students in every room.
Every
in
club.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, so obviously, not
That
all
would,
of
that
those.
would qualify, honestly, that would qualify as one of the largest churches here in the Valley. I mean, if that were considered a church.
Yeah, I guess.
Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, if you look at it
Yeah.
from that perspective, that's one of probably the largest church in the Valley if you look at it from that.
And one of the, one of the
you're
things.
not. I want to make sure
Yeah,
you're
right.
not a church.
Yeah.
You're a parachurch.
We're
You're
a
coming alongside a
parachurch.
church.
Yeah.
But just to put it in perspective for people that are maybe a part of church ministry or church leadership teams, and you're overseeing 100, 200, 300 people, right? Every week you're overseeing 1,200 students. Like that.
Yeah.
That's a massive organization that you have to be able to care
Yeah,
for.
it's. I mean, the more we think about that, the more overwhelming it seems.
Right.
But I mean, when you get enough volunteers and enough people involved in the ministry, then obviously that number becomes much smaller because you've only got like 30 teenagers in the room, or 40 or 50, depending on the Campus Life Club, and then you've got volunteers there and your student leader team. So I mean, it becomes a very manageable group of people. But yeah, I mean, I guess when you think of it in like networking and staff management terms, I mean, it can be overwhelming.
It's pretty
to
big,
think
right?
about. Yeah,
It really
sure.
is. I mean, well, you said 1,200 a week. That's a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
just if I think about that from like the congregational perspective, that's a lot of people to have to care for.
Yeah.
So kudos to you guys. That's
and,
great.
And the
You
other
guys have
thing
staff
too
do that.
to consider is that a lot of those teens that we're engaging are unchurched kids. So these are kids that have just come into a club on their campus that they saw a banner or heard music and came into the room
Smelled
with their
pizza?
lunch. Yeah, smelled pizza. Exactly. Or
Right.
some crazy game was
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
They wanted to see someone get shaving cream in their face or something. And so yeah. I mean, when you think of such a large number of kids, and then 60-70% of those kids maybe have never stepped foot into a youth group or
One of my
involved in a
first
church.
exposures to Christ was at a Campus Life event that was going on at Central. I didn't get saved till after high school, right?
Yeah.
And so there was this baby food relay that they were doing. Do you guys still do baby food relays?
We do. Baby food's pretty popular.
Oh
in
man,
youth ministry games.
baby food relay, and it was this game where you had to finish your jar of baby food before the next person could, and I got stuck with peas. And so I was eating these peas, and I couldn't even swallow. It tasted so terrible. Kid. It was just running down my face.
You were that kid that always comes out in our promo videos.
There's probably a video of me somewhere with peas running down my face, and so you just got to look through the archives for that because it's there somewhere.
Yeah.
But that was one of my first exposures to the church at all.
You just reminded me when you're talking. One of my best memories of you when you were volunteering and a part of the ministry at YFC. We were at a fifth quarter in, I can't remember where it was at, Brawley or
yes, it was Brawley. I know where this is going.
Yeah, and we had done a game where, and I think this particular game was one where you had to eat like 2 or 3 bananas and then drink a Sprite, and the first one to finish their Sprite. And then, of course, when you eat bananas, you can't swallow the Sprite. It just foams up in your mouth. And so we had these kids doing that, and then we're here in the gym, and we've got that wood floor in the gym, and so we've got this event, where kids are spitting, foaming, soda and banana out of their mouth. And so right after the event, we do the gospel presentation.
Yeah.
So, we try to clean up as quick as we can and get stuff out of the way.
Well,
no, we didn't clean very well. But you come out and you've got and you always had great messages, engaging, gospel message for the kids. And so you come out there and quickly realize that you're not going to be able to move around because your sandals.
I was wearing sandals.
Yeah, and they were stuck to the floor.
I literally felt like, you have those rat traps that you set up, those sticky traps. I felt like I was in a sticky trap. And so every time I moved, you'd have that squeaking sound and that.
And then the slap of your sandals
on
would come
foot.
back. Yeah.
Yep, that's one of those stories.
You took a few steps, and then after that, you were like, nope,
I gotta just stand still. And even to this day, I have trouble standing still. I don't stand behind a pulpit because I feel kind of.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I move around a lot, so that must have been.
It was
like
tough.
Prison, man.
It was tough, but it all for the Lord's glory, right?
Yeah,
all for the Lord's glory.
That's right.
So you mentioned that now since COVID, you're not able to be in person or face-to-face meetings with students, so you're engaging them via Zoom and those types of things. So, in what other ways has youth ministry been affected during this time of pandemic? How have you been able to meet those different challenges to be able to continue to bring the gospel to students that need it?
Yeah, so it has been challenging. I mean, for us to go from a ministry that is built on relationship and built on meeting with people, being in the same room with people, it was really tough making that, turning that corner from being in a room with a student to now being on a computer screen with a group of kids. And so that was hard. And plus, our footprint obviously got much smaller.
Right.
Because I mean, we're dealing with over 1,000 teens, from different campuses all over the valley, and now all of a sudden we've just got a handful of kids here and there that are in Zoom meetings.
Right.
It's really hard to make that transition and to feel like you're still, being valuable and being
Right.
Not valuable, but that you're accomplishing something.
Right.
That you're putting a dent in the ministry that needs to be.
So are the students that are still engaged, then those are more like the student leaders that are?
Yeah, so you end up having a lot of the kids that are attending things virtually are student leaders and kids that have a little stronger connection to campus life. And so all of a sudden you've taken that group that's a majority of the students that you meet with,
yeah.
and all of a sudden those kids are not as reachable. And
Right.
so it has been tough and at times discouraging, but my staff have been super creative. I mean, I love seeing the ideas that they come up with and just ways that they manage to brainstorm and and they just they have these incredible things that they're doing where they're meeting students and they're ministering to kids, and I mean, you have to be creative when you've got like one avenue, like this is it, right?
Oh, plus, and kids are on Zoom for their schooling, like 4, 5, 6 hours a day, and probably the last thing they want to do is get on another Zoom meeting.
Exactly,
right?
and we
Zoom
saw
fatigue
that.
is a real thing.
Yeah, it really is. We saw that when we did our student leadership training, because typically we would train anywhere between 50 and 70 students at this training, and so when we started getting ready for that and started promoting it and recruiting kids to sign up and be a part of it, I think like 2 days out, we had 5 students registered for our student leadership training. And so we were bummed out. I mean, our staff got together and we actually were like, okay, what's the number of students that we'll have on this in order to make it legitimate? Like, I mean, at some point we just got to say, well, hey, we're not going to be able to do it.
Postpone this or something until.
Yeah. And so we had decided if we have a dozen kids, then it's worth our time and energy and the money we spent on all the leadership manuals and all the stuff that we were giving to the kids. And so we ended up having like 22 kids.
That's good.
So, I mean,
they all waited until the last minute, just
right?
like their term papers, or
which probably would have happened anyway. But that was kind of looming over us, and so we weren't sure how that was going to work out. But yeah, I mean, like I said, that transition of being in a room full of students, and having that reaching that attendance where the room fills full, to being on camera with a handful of kids is really, I mean, that's hard on the psyche, I think, of a youth ministry guy or gal.
You preach also, so it's very difficult to preach to an empty room.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're almost starting to get used to it, but I don't want to get used to it.
Right.
I can't accept this as
the norm, right?
Yeah, right.
It can't be the new norm. This can't be the new norm.
But
you mentioned the creativity that your staff has had to try to employ in order to be able to continue to reach students, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate the most about Youth for Christ is the gospel message doesn't change, right? We can't, obviously the Word of God never changes, just like God never changes. The gospel message cannot change. There's certain things that we can't compromise on these areas, but the way that we take that gospel to people, right? We have to make sure that we're relevant with what is happening in our culture. And so, from the time when I was doing youth ministry, which, I guess I haven't been doing youth ministry since 2005. That's when my son was born, so that's I've been out about the time you went to Youth for Christ is about the time I stopped doing youth ministry. But at that time, like you could have a few pizzas, you could have a couple video games, and you get a crowd of people, right? You can get a ton of people. And it's not that way anymore. I mean, kids have so many different ways to be able to connect socially.
Yeah.
Right. Before, when you had some sort of event, kids wanted to come out because they
you were
wanted
the only thing in town.
Exactly. They wanted to see their friends. They wanted to interact and have a social life of some sort. And so that was kind of a hook that you could use to give the gospel. Now with social media, I mean, they're bombarded with it. They're constantly being entertained, and they're watching TV while they're on their phone, while they're listening to the radio. So
you're even talking pre-COVID.
That's pre-COVID. That's even pre-COVID.
So youth ministry had already kind of metamorphed into something completely different.
Right.
Before COVID restrictions fell on us. So, yeah, I mean, you're right. There was a time where, it was not unusual for a church to have a youth group of 80, 90 kids. That was, I think of all the youth groups that we worked with, there was probably 5 or 6 youth groups that averaged around that number.
Right.
And so, a small youth group was like 50 kids.
Right.
Like, hey, what's going on there, man?
Yeah.
What are they doing wrong?
Right. Yeah. It's true.
So yeah, but then it was with social media and with so many other forms of entertainment at kids' fingertips. I think it became harder and harder for youth ministers to engage kids in a way that really could compete with all that stuff.
Right.
And maybe that was the problem. We were trying to compete with it.
Right.
We've talked about that a lot over the years. Just in general in youth ministry that we could never compete with what these other.
The gospel has to stand on its own, right?
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
And whatever it is that attracted those students to be a part of your youth ministry had to be consistent and stable, and it had to be the thing that kept them there.
Right.
And so that's why with YFC, relationship, and we do a lot of fun games and activities and things like that, because we want kids to smile and have that good feeling like, I enjoyed that. I'm definitely going back. But the thing that keeps them coming back week after week is the relationships that they build with other students and with the volunteers or the staff.
So has a lot of your effort then has it kind of shifted to having that platform, that medium of social media, where you're connecting with more kids that way? I'm sure during COVID time, but even pre-COVID time, what was that something that was kind of becoming more important to be able to connect with kids?
For sure, and I feel like we were now looking back on it, I thought we were pretty good at engaging on social media, but realized we were just kind of dabbling with it.
Right.
Now I feel like we're doing an effective job of using social media.
Trial by error, right? I mean, we're thrown into the wolves now.
Right. Now we figured out what works and what engages kids. I mean, obviously it's still that problem of being a smaller audience, and there's still tons of kids that are not being connected with or reached because of whatever reason,
right?
Whether it's Zoom fatigue or just the interest, things have changed so much. But the important thing is that we're still engaging kids in relationship, but it's just happening over on a virtual platform,
right?
Which is not the ideal way to do it, but
well, I think but there are a lot of churches that are having to really reassess even the way that they've spent their own resources and their own infrastructure, because there is a huge amount of people now that are interacting, and that their only interaction with the church is via social media or some sort of digital platform.
Right.
So you're starting to see these churches that are popping up, and they're having like an online pastor, right? Instead of like a campus pastor or like I'm a pastor over young adults. Like my job or my role would be to be an online pastor and to connect with these people. So I'm sure that you're having to do that with these youth in the same way, and that's part of the creativity, trying to stay ahead of it, right?
And it's one of the reasons that I feel like has necessitated having a larger staff right now.
Right.
Which, you would think, we're not doing as many events and we're not like out and about in the community and going places with students, and so you'd think we need a smaller team, but it really takes a larger team to engage kids in that way, because you've got to have, you think of the number of kids that you have that you're connecting with at one time virtually. In order to increase that number, you've got to have more of those people that are doing that. And so
you can't just have a pop-up and have 50 kids come.
Right.
You've got to contact them and invite them and make sure that they're there. And
it takes you 10 or 15 virtual events to reach that number of kids you would have just, ordered some pizzas and
totally makes sense.
Up.
Yeah. No more days of Rick and Mick, or was that what it was? Rick and Mick, just have pizzas after school and have 800 people show up or whatever.
Right.
So those were the good old days, right?
Right. Yeah.
So what do you see the future of youth ministry then being? And maybe answer that question before COVID, because obviously we can't tell what's going to happen in the next year or 2 years with what's happening here. But before COVID hit, what did you see the trajectory looking like, and then how has COVID now changed, where you maybe feel like we're going to be over the next year and year and a half, what we're going to be doing?
So I feel like we were moving more towards a lot of virtual ministry anyway.
Okay.
And I think a lot of ministries were a little resistant to that because they didn't want that to be the reality of the way they were doing ministry. Right. And I feel like COVID just kind of launched us into that arena, and we were just like unprepared for it. But pre-COVID, I feel like we were already kind of headed in that direction. And But I think one thing that was not changing, when you subtract, large crowds and big events or rallies or trips, the one thing that was not changing was that personal connection that you would have with young people. And as well as I do, having been youth pastors, you could have a room full of kids and you really only had about 6 or 8 kids that you had a strong discipleship connection with,
absolutely.
Where you could see those kids continuing in their faith and not graduating out of their faith when they left youth group. And so I think that aspect has not changed in the sense that small, kind of dynamic that Jesus modeled, with his 12 disciples, like that's a piece that has remained the same. But outreach, evangelism, like all those different aspects of ministry is what has completely changed. And it's so different now. And even, minus the pandemic, I feel like we were going to have to really think of ways to be able to engage kids on social media. Because
if you think about it, I mean, they've got this in front of their face 5, 6, 7 hours a day, and what better way? I mean, you have a captive audience, really, right? And so to some degree, in order to reach, Gen Z or, millennials and Gen Z or whatever they're calling themselves.
Screenagers, we call them.
Screenagers, there you go. In order to reach screenagers, you're going to have to be able to have some sort of presence in social media, in those online platforms. So not only does it take creativity on your staff's part, though it also takes having to learn how to use these platforms, kind of training yourself on the effectiveness of these platforms. And that's a whole nother level of, of difficulty in having your whole staff trained on these things.
Yeah, and I think that has been one of the biggest curves is just getting everybody on board technologically and figuring out how all this works and being familiar with the platform so that we could use it to its full potential. Because I think before we were, it's like we had this Cadillac, and we were just using it to drive down to the corner, and we weren't really realizing, this thing has the engine where we could really take places that we, never thought of before. And I think COVID helped us realize that, but I believe that we were starting to head down that path, and we just didn't realize that was where we were headed.
Well, that's good. So it just kind of helped. It pushed you in that direction a little bit quicker than maybe you were prepared for.
Right.
But in the end, it's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
What the enemy intends for evil, the Lord uses for good. And so.
And I feel like, honestly, if we would have taken advantage of those tools that we had, and that maybe even that mindset of here's a new way of reaching kids, just a whole different arena. I feel like it would have been more effective in a non-pandemic society than it is now. Because now it feels like, oh, we had to do that.
Right.
So we're just doing what we had to do.
It would have felt trendy or posh, like a couple of Starbucks if it hadn't been related to pandemic, right?
Yeah. So it's like we're playing the hand we're dealt. Now we just have
That's
to do
true.
this.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot with this question, but maybe you know this off the top of your head. How many ministries, are you working with as a parachurch? How many churches are a part of your network, or youth pastors are a part of your network currently?
Okay, so we have had, and this is something that maybe our listeners or viewers didn't realize, that Youth for Christ has always been kind of the hub for youth ministry in the Valley, where we brought together youth pastors and youth
I still
workers.
Get the emails. I get the emails for every other
kept
Friday.
I kept you on there, and a handful of the guys that were there when I was a part of it. More for this nostalgic,
Yeah. There you go.
Because I wanted you guys to feel like, oh yeah, this is still going on. It's still happening.
I still miss the breakfast
legacy
burrito.
Talk about legacy, right?
Yeah.
The breakfast burritos. But yeah, so that's always been a big part of YFC, and I feel like that, the fact that local church youth ministry has been kind of the heartbeat of Youth for Christ has been such a good thing, and probably the reason that YFC is still around. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we would have really been here for the long haul if we were trying to do parachurch ministry but not engaging youth workers at local churches and trying to help them do youth ministry better at their churches.
Well,
And
what I
so-
appreciated so much about the network when I was doing youth ministry is that, none of us are a mega church where we could pull off these big events on our own.
Yeah.
Right? We really needed one another. If we were going to do these big concerts, these big lock-ins, these big events, we needed to
some
all
help.
come
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
And so that was what was able to facilitate that unity amongst the body and the
Yeah.
ability to reach even more kids, is because we did have that network where we could come together and we could talk. And I mean, we had reading lists, and we read through a book together and kind of
Yeah.
really try to keep each other sharp, even
You get to share
doctrinally.
prayer requests. I mean, I
Right.
think one of the most powerful times, even now in our network, is those times where we shared, like, the heartbreak of youth ministry and the struggle, and even things that were going on in our families. Like, we could bring those into that discussion and just say, hey, a group of youth pastors and people who are not just my colleagues, but they're my brothers and sisters that I can lay these things out, and we could bear one another burden. I guess
Yeah.
that's really what it was.
Yeah.
And so that's still very much a part of the Youth Pastors Network, and probably the reason that youth pastors and ministries are still a part of that. And I would say that there's always been at least a dozen, getting back to the number
right.
question, there's always been at least a dozen churches that are strongly connected to that network.
And there's far more than a dozen people on
There
that
is.
email list.
There is. There's like over 100 names that I have on that email
That are
list.
invited
And
to that
some of them
meeting,
are, are what do you call them?
Dinosaurs like me?
Yeah, I wasn't going to use that term. I was going to say, I can't think of it. Anyway.
Yeah.
But so basically, you've got this large group of youth workers that are, for the most part, feeling like they're doing ministry alone. Like they
Yeah.
feel like they're the only person in the world that's doing youth ministry, and it's dealing with the problems that they're dealing with.
Right.
And so that's really what we wanted to do with the Youth Pastors Network, is to create a place where, I say we as if I invented it. I didn't invent it, obviously.
Sure.
It was going on
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
I was grateful for it when I was a part of it.
Right.
In that respect, but yeah, creating that space where you could come as a youth worker and you could not only get ideas and partner on things where you could do bigger events together,
Right.
but also you had that support where you knew that you had someone else who was going through the same things, that was praying for you, or lifting you up.
Speaking about those big events, I mean, that's how Soulfire was birthed, was through this
Yeah,
network.
yeah.
I mean, that's how we were able to have that. And there's been how many hundreds of kids have gone through that camp,
Yeah.
and have been able to be ministered to through
it's
that
crazy,
weekend. My
man.
own kids are going to that
Yeah.
camp now.
And it's funny you mention that, because there are a couple things that are happening with Soulfire. Pre-COVID, Soulfire, was this camp that was just growing every year.
Right.
I think we had 210 or 220 teens that went last year.
Yeah, that's
which
great.
Which is awesome. Remember, it started out when there was just a
There
couple
were
churches.
3 youth groups.
Yeah.
I think there were 3 youth groups that went the first time.
And so it was a fun, great camp, but it just continued to grow, and we were always utilizing local youth pastors to speak at the camp, and so it wasn't like we were flying in
Right.
a speaker that didn't know the kids,
Which
to
is
share for
effective
the
too. They can
weekend.
connect with youth pastors
Yeah.
from their area.
And the fact that we were doing a camp that, or are doing a camp that, I don't want to say we were, even though it feels like
Yeah.
it's going away
Is that ever gonna happen
now.
again?
But yeah, we were doing a camp where kids could come and they would meet and make friends with another kid, and it wouldn't be like just that weekend of camp and then see you later and
Right.
never see them again.
They're on their campus
Yeah.
with that friend. That
Yeah,
they,
they'll-
hey, you're a
they're-
Christian too. You
Yeah.
you love the Lord too.
like
that
they're
kind of
going
thing.
to see them again. They're
Right.
not like the old days when it was a pen pal.
Yeah,
right?
that's true. That's true.
So and Soulfire has been a really good, not only winter camp experience for the kids, but has been a really useful ministry tool for all the youth groups, because they use that as like a big part of their annual youth ministry.
Calendared on our calendar.
Yeah.
So
And so I've been so grateful for that ministry, and I've had a couple of times, not just a couple times, it's happened several times where I've run into someone who's middle-aged, at the grocery store or something, and they'll come up to me and they'll say, hey, you're Jeremiah, right? And I don't know who they are,
Yeah.
but I'm just assuming it's like someone that used to be in Campus Life or something like that. And they'll, and they're like maybe in their early 30s or late 20s or something, and they'll tell me, I got saved at Soulfire.
wow, that's amazing.
And I'm
What
just
a
like, wow,
testimony.
that's crazy.
Makes it worth it.
Yeah, it really does.
That makes it all worth it.
It's neat to see people having been affected by this ministry that we started back in, when did that thing start? probably
It
before
must have been
2000. Was it?
2003? No, I don't
When
think
we
it was.
started really connecting with all the churches, because before it was just
a ski trip.
Yeah,
Kind of like a ski trip.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we actually made it a camp, Soulfire Camp, it was must have been 2002, 3, something like that.
I think so.
Somewhere in that range. But yeah, that's been a blessing. So you got like hundreds of people on that list from all different churches that you're coming alongside of and trying to equip them to be able to go back into their churches to be more effective with youth ministry. How can people get in touch with you if maybe their youth leaders from their church aren't a part of that network and they want to get involved in that network? Is that open? Kind of open invitation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're welcome to to call our office at any time. I mean that's always an open invitation. But I mean, I think probably the best and quickest way to get a hold of us is through social media, because you can direct message. Yeah, and I think that's kind of been our main way of connecting with new people. It used to be, you'd have to have the phone number of the office.
You don't need voicemail anymore, really.
Yeah, right, exactly. So that would be my suggestion, because you'll get the quickest response that way if you leave a message because obviously we're not in the office as much because of COVID, and so we're there for when we need to be there for essential things, but we try to limit our time that we're doing stuff down there, and so yeah, that's the fastest way to probably get a hold of us, is just connect with. And we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, so we might even be on other platforms. My staff.
Parlor, you got Parlor now and all
no,
those.
Not yet. I've just been hearing about it, but yeah.
So all right, so good. So then, how can these churches then, during this season, how can our church as a local churches come alongside of Youth for Christ, a parachurch that purpose is to help us as a church better reach our students, better reach our youth? How can these churches return the favor during this season and help you out? Either through prayer, specific ways that we can pray for the ministry of Youth for Christ, or maybe volunteer, or even give financially. What are some of the needs that you guys are experiencing right now that maybe people who are listening today or watching today might feel compelled to come alongside of you?
Yeah, well, I think you mentioned the top three there. We have a huge need for volunteers. We always have a need for volunteers, but I feel like right now we really need volunteers, because it's just taking more people. And for every youth group in church that that will let their youth workers or folks in their church know about our ministry and that there's a need there, it not only helps the ministry of Youth for Christ become stronger, but it helps that church become stronger, because their connections with students, unchurched students, and potential student leaders. I mean, that's a phenomenal.
Right. It really is symbiotic, right? It works for both. It's helpful in both. It
really
ministries.
does. I mean, honestly, we exist for the purpose of helping the local church, and so it's not like we're trying to build a kingdom unto ourselves.
Right.
Obviously, we want to stay afloat. We want to.
That brings up another point that I've seen happen. Is there are a lot of people that have been trained or raised up through the ministry of Youth for Christ that have been planted at other churches as youth pastors in order to help other ministries. Maybe it's not the church that they grew up in, but there's a need in another church, and so that person has been kind of raised up and trained, and now they're youth pastoring at another church, right? So this is the guy to contact if anybody needs a youth pastor at their church. This is the guy to reach out to.
I've seen that happen a lot. Like that's me too. I'm a guy who got connected to Youth for Christ and to the Youth Pastors Network, and I saw that it's just an open door. To do more stuff and to be, actually to become a better leader myself. And so, that's a huge. So getting back to the ways that the church can support what YFC is doing, volunteer wise, obviously we want to let people know that we are, actively doing ministry to young people that can benefit their church, and so we need volunteers. And then, as you mentioned, the financial support, being a part of a church's mission budget is probably the best thing that a church can do.
This is a really good time to bring that up, too, because a lot of churches kind of reassess their missions budget around this time of year, because the New Year's right around the corner. So, again, if somebody's listening out there today and, you're part of a ministry team or a church leadership team, maybe you want to consider Youth for Christ in your year-end giving, or in maybe fitting that into your monthly missions budget for next year.
And a couple thoughts on that. There are so many good missions groups. The missionaries that we support at our church, I love them, and they're doing amazing work. I feel like one small advantage to supporting a local ministry is that you see like in it kind of have it played out for you in front of you how your support is being used to reach young people in the valley.
Not only that, the other thing that I really appreciate is you can actually go be a part of that work.
Yeah.
Not just send a check. I mean, you're close enough where, hey, you know what, I want to go see what's going on with that event, or I want to go see what's going on with that hub, or that gathering, or whatever it is you guys, when that that time comes, or I want to go check out
tomorrow morning, as a matter of fact.
yeah, there you go. Or I want to go check out once, should the Lord tarry and Lord, provide and permit, when you have those big campus life clubs meeting again, and you have the fifth quarters going again, you can go see hands-on what your ministry support is doing.
Volunteer
and
for a night and come and just have your world opened up to what God's doing with teenagers.
Go put your sandals in some sticky floor, right? go eat some baby food or something.
That's right, man.
Yeah. So good. So we got volunteer, we got give, and then what are the
third big one is praying. Yeah, absolutely. That I feel like out of those three, you hesitate to say, oh, I don't want to put like our financial needs low on the list, because that's so important. But honestly, prayer is the thing that really makes ministry happen. And that's, not like I'm saying the prayer itself like a force, but I'm saying, when believers are uniting and bringing these needs before God, the Spirit of God moves on behalf of the prayers of the people. And so, I just feel like, knowing how you can pray for our ministry and being consistent in that prayer, I feel like that's the thing that has really kept our ministry consistently successful, if you want to use that word, but maybe that's not a good word. Effective, I guess, for the kingdom is just the prayers of the local churches and believers. So one thing, we send out a prayer email, and then each of our staff have their own prayer newsletters they send out. And so I think to know about the needs of YFC, that's a good way to stay connected to that. And we share some of our needs on social media, but you're really going to hear a little more of the nitty gritty, the stuff that has really challenging, the things where we really need prayer that we can't necessarily just post on social media and say, hey, everybody pray about this. There's some stuff that's a little closer to our heart, of our ministry. And
so they can DM you to get a part.
And they can really find out, how to pray for our ministry. But
we at Christ Community Church are certainly grateful for yourself and your staff being on the front lines, your volunteers being on the front lines of this ministry. We know that this is kind of like the last line of defense before these kids go off to college and they're thrown to the wolves and they're thrown into the world. And if they don't have a good foundation in their faith before they graduate on into that part of their life, then it's going to be much more difficult for their walk to be able to be a fruitful walk with the Lord. So that's why this season in life is so important, and for the kids to be reached and ministered to during this particular time. What I mean by time is in this particular age, but also at their particular age. It's kind of twofold, right? And so now more than ever, ministries like Youth for Christ really need the support of the local body to come alongside of you guys too, and just to encourage you guys too in the midst of the COVID pandemic and shutdowns, and ministry isn't the same as it used to be. It's different. So we certainly appreciate everything you've done. Thanks for taking the time to be able to visit with us today and share a little bit about your heart and what's going on at the ministry. You're welcome back whenever you'd like to.
Awesome.
Let us know if you ever want to come in. So that's our podcast for today. Again, thank you to Jeremiah Vik and Youth for Christ, Campus Life, and 95.3 The Edge.
We didn't even talk about that, did we?
I know, we didn't even get to talk about that, but they have a radio station, 95.3 The Edge. You can direct message them for any needs that you have. If you want to maybe volunteer, if you want to be a part of that prayer list or that prayer group, if you want to maybe get involved in their bi-monthly ministry meetings, ministry partner meetings, be a part of that network, that would be great too. Message Jeremiah if your church is in need of someone to do youth. He might be able to hook you up with someone. But this is the guy right here on the front lines of youth ministry in the Imperial Valley. We're grateful for all that he does. This is one of the ministries that is a part of our missions budget here at Christ Community Church. We hope that your church would prayerfully consider making it Youth for Christ a part of your monthly ministry budget as well. It's a ministry well worth supporting. Again, so many youth are being impacted. 1,200 a week before COVID hit were being impacted by the ministries of Youth for Christ and Campus Life. So again, Jeremiah, thanks for joining us on Community
Chris.
Conversation, and we'll check you out next time.
Thanks to Christ Community, man. I really appreciate you guys' support, and I would say that to any of our churches. We couldn't do what we do without our our supporters, and so
Absolutely.
huge thanks to you guys. You guys have always been there for us, and not
We'll
only
continue
faithfully
it, too.
supporting us financially, but I mean, I feel like whenever we have a need, I feel like you're a phone call away, and I take advantage of that quite a bit.
We got your back.
Yeah. So thanks so much
Absolutely.
for that. Appreciate
All to
that,
the glory of the
Chris.
Lord. All right. Thanks for joining us, guys. See you next time.